In the quiet village of Ndalani, people believed that bad luck did not come without a reason. They believed that when misfortune followed a house, it meant someone inside carried darkness. And in that village, many believed that darkness lived inside Amara. Amara was only 17, yet her life already felt heavy like a burden she could not put down. Every morning before the sun rose, while the sky was still gray and silent, she was already awake. Her hands were always busy, sweeping the dusty yard, fetching water from the distant well, scrubbing clothes until her fingers turned raw and sore. Inside the small mud house, her stepmother Zola watched her with cold eyes that never showed kindness. "Move faster," Zola would snap whenever Amara slowed even for a moment. There was never praise, never rest, only commands, only blame. Zola's daughters, Nia and Tessa, treated Amara even worse. They laughed when she stumbled. They whispered insults when she passed by. Sometimes they would sit together eating warm meals while Amara stood nearby with an empty stomach. "You eat after we finish," Nia would say with a cruel smile. Most nights there was barely anything left. Amara learned to swallow hunger the same way she swallowed her tears, quietly without complaint. But there was a time when life was not like this. There was a time when laughter lived inside that house. When her father was alive. Her father had been a gentle man with strong hands and a warm voice. He used to lift her onto his shoulders and tell her stories under the moonlight. He protected her, defended her, loved her. But the day he died, everything changed. The warmth in the house died with him. And from that day forward, Amara became alone, even when surrounded by people. In the village, whispers followed her wherever she went. "Stay away from that girl," some women would murmur. "She brings trouble." Others called her unlucky, strange, cursed. It didn't help that small misfortunes seemed to follow her home. A chicken dying without reason. A pot cracking suddenly in the fire. Rain falling heavily only over their field while others stayed dry. Each strange event made the villagers more uneasy. And each time something went wrong, Zola made sure everyone blamed Amara. "She brought this darkness into my home," Zola once said loudly at the marketplace. Amara heard those words. She always heard them. But she never defended herself. She only lowered her eyes and kept walking. Deep inside, however, something hurt in a way that never healed. She missed her father every single day. Sometimes late at night when everyone else slept, Amara would sit quietly outside and stare at the stars. She would whisper softly into the wind, hoping somehow her father could hear her. "I wish you were still here." Those were the only moments she allowed herself to cry. Yet there was something else about Zola that made Amara uneasy. Something hidden. Something strange. Whenever Amara mentioned her father, Zola's face would change. Not with sadness. With fear. A quick flicker of fear that disappeared as fast as it came. Amara noticed it many times. But she never understood why. Beyond the village stood an old place that no one visited after sunset. The graveyard. It was ancient, filled with crooked stones and forgotten names. The villagers believed restless spirits wandered there at night. They said those spirits punished the guilty and protected the innocent. Children were warned never to go near it. Even grown men avoided walking past it in darkness. Yet lately, strange stories had begun to spread. Some villagers claimed they heard whispers carried by the wind. Others said shadows moved where no one stood. And then, something even stranger began happening. At night, dogs barked wildly near Zola's house. Goats refused to enter the yard. Chickens scattered in panic without cause. The villagers began to notice. They began to whisper. At the water well, women leaned close together, lowering their voices. "Something is wrong in that house," one woman said nervously. "I heard noises last night," another added. "Not human noises." Someone else whispered words that made the air feel colder. "It is the girl," they said. "Amara is bringing spirits closer to us." And from the doorway of her home, unseen and unheard, Amara stood quietly, listening. Her heart pounded inside her chest. Not because she believed them, but because she knew something terrible was beginning. Something she would not be able to stop. And somewhere beyond the trees, in the silent graveyard where shadows rested among broken stones, the wind began to rise. The whispers did not stop. In fact, they grew louder with each passing day. At first, Amara tried to ignore them. She kept her head down and focused on her work, hoping that if she stayed quiet, the rumors would fade like smoke in the wind. But the rumors only spread further. And the ones spreading them the most were Nia and Tessa. One afternoon at the village well, Nia leaned close to a group of women drawing water. Her voice was soft but loud enough for others to hear. Strange things keep happening in our house, she said, shaking her head slowly. Every night, something moves, something watches. The women gasped. Tessa added quickly, her voice trembling as if she were afraid. We think it is Amara, she whispered. Since father died, nothing has been right. Amara stood nearby, holding her empty bucket. She froze when she heard her name. Her hands tightened around the rope, but she said nothing. She never said anything. The women turned their eyes toward her. Some stepped back slightly as if her shadow alone could harm them. Others stared at her with suspicion. Amara felt her chest grow tight. The air felt heavy, hard to breathe. She lowered her head and walked away quietly. But behind her, the whispers followed. That night, something else happened. While Amara was washing dishes near the fire, a clay plate slipped from her hands and shattered against the floor. The sharp sound echoed through the house. Zola rushed into the room, her face dark with anger. What have you done now? She shouted. Amara knelt quickly, trying to gather the broken pieces. I did not mean to. But before she could finish, Nia stepped forward. It is always her, Nia said bitterly. Everything breaks around her. Tessa nodded quickly. Even the goats are afraid of her now. As if summoned by those words, a goat outside suddenly let out a loud cry and pulled violently against its rope. The sudden noise made everyone freeze. Zola's face slowly changed. Fear crept into her eyes, deep and cold. Then she looked at Amara, her voice shaking. You bring darkness into this house. Amara felt those words cut deeper than any blade. She wanted to defend herself. She wanted to cry out and say it was not true. But her voice remained trapped inside her throat. Because deep inside, she knew no one would believe her. Days passed, but peace never returned. More strange things followed. A cooking pot cracked in the middle of boiling water. A hen refused to lay eggs. At night, dogs barked toward their house without reason. Each time something happened, Zola made sure others heard about it. At the marketplace, she spoke loudly, her voice full of worry. I fear for my daughters, she told the villagers. Something follows that girl. The villagers listened carefully. Fear began growing among them like weeds after rain. Soon, the rumors reached the ears of the village elders. These elders were old men who protected the traditions of the land. They believed that spirits walked among the living and punished those who carried darkness. One evening, the elders gathered under the large baobab tree at the center of the village. Torches flickered around them as villagers formed a wide circle. Amara stood at the edge of the crowd, her heart pounding. She did not know why she had been called. But she felt danger in the air. Nia suddenly stepped forward, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. We cannot live like this anymore, she cried. Our house is cursed. Tessa joined her, pretending to wipe tears from her eyes. We fear for our lives every night. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Zola stepped forward slowly. Her face looked tired, but her eyes were sharp. There is only one way to know the truth, she said. The crowd fell silent. The eldest elder leaned forward. What do you suggest? He asked. For a moment, Zola said nothing. Then Nia spoke again, her voice trembling with false fear. In the old ways, she said, when someone was suspected of carrying darkness, they were tested. A heavy silence fell. Everyone understood what she meant. The graveyard. The place no one dared to sleep. Tessa stepped closer to the elders. If she is innocent, she said, pointing toward Amara, then the spirits will not harm her. Amara's heart stopped. Her breath caught in her chest. Sleep? In the graveyard? The thought alone made her legs weak. The elders exchanged worried looks. Some hesitated. Others shook their heads. This is dangerous, one elder said quietly. But the crowd had already begun whispering again. Fear had taken hold of their minds. If she is innocent, someone shouted from the crowd, she has nothing to fear. Yes, another voice added. Let the spirits decide. Amara felt the world spinning around her. Her eyes searched the faces of the villagers, faces she had known since childhood. Not one of them looked kind. Not one of them looked willing to help. Even the elders who once protected the weak, now looked uncertain. Fear had turned them cold. Amara wanted to speak. She wanted to beg them to stop. But her voice felt small against the weight of their fear. Inside her chest, her heart beat wildly. She clasped her hands tightly together. Not in protest. Not in anger. But in silent prayer. Please, someone help me. Please, do not let them do this. But no one stepped forward. No one defended her. And slowly, one by one, the villagers began to nod, convincing themselves this cruelty was necessary, convincing themselves it was justice. while Amara stood alone in the center of the crowd, feeling the ground beneath her feet slowly slipping away. The decision was made before the sun could set. No one asked Amara what she felt. No one cared whether she was afraid. By late afternoon, the entire village already knew what would happen that night. Amara would sleep in the graveyard, alone. The sky slowly turned orange as the sun began to sink behind the tall trees. A cold wind passed through the village, making dry leaves scratch against the ground. Amara stood quietly outside the house, her hands shaking. Zola did not look at her. Nia and Tessa watched her with cruel smiles, whispering to each other as if this were some kind of game. Soon the elders arrived. 2 men stepped forward and motioned for Amara to follow. Her legs felt weak, but she obeyed. She had always obeyed. Villagers gathered along the narrow dirt path, forming a silent line as Amara walked between them. Some stared with cold curiosity. Others looked away, unable to meet her eyes. But no one spoke. No one stopped them. As they walked farther from the village, the sounds of daily life slowly faded. No laughter. No voices. Only the wind. The graveyard stood at the edge of the forest, old, forgotten, and feared. Even in daylight, it felt heavy and quiet. Now, as the sun dropped lower, long shadows stretched across the crooked stones. Amara's heart pounded harder with every step. She recognized the place. Her father was buried there. She remembered the day they laid him into the earth. The sound of soil falling onto the wooden coffin. The way her small hands trembled as she cried. That memory still lived inside her like a wound that never healed. When they reached the gate, Amara stopped walking. Her feet refused to move. The iron gate creaked loudly as one of the elders pushed it open. The sound echoed like a warning. "Go inside," one elder said firmly. Amara swallowed hard. Her throat felt dry like sand. She wanted to run. She wanted to scream. But she forced her feet to move forward. One step. Then another. The villagers remained outside the gate. Watching. Waiting. As Amara walked deeper into the graveyard, the air felt colder. The smell of damp earth filled her nose. Old stones stood in every direction, leaning at strange angles. Some were broken. Some had no names. Some were covered in thick moss. The sun slipped lower and darkness began to creep across the land. Amara reached her father's grave. She stopped there, her chest rising and falling quickly. She lowered herself slowly onto the ground beside it. The earth beneath her felt hard and cold. Behind her, the villagers began placing a small lantern near the grave. Its weak flame flickered in the growing darkness. "You must stay here until morning," an elder said. His voice held no comfort, only duty. Amara looked up at them, her eyes wide with fear. For a moment she hoped someone, anyone, would change their mind. But no one did. Instead, the elders turned away. One by one the villagers followed. Their footsteps faded slowly into the distance. Until finally, there was silence. Complete silence. Amara was alone. Truly alone. The sky darkened above her as night swallowed the last light of day. The lantern beside her flickered weakly, casting moving shadows across the graves. The wind grew stronger, brushing against her skin like cold fingers. Amara wrapped her arms tightly around herself, trying to stop her body from shaking. She stared at her father's grave. Tears slowly filled her eyes. "I am scared," she whispered softly, her voice barely louder than the wind. She wished he were there. She wished he could hold her like he once did when she was small. She closed her eyes tightly. And in her mind she remembered his voice, calm and warm. "Fear is strong," he used to say. "But your heart is stronger." She held on to those words now like a lifeline. Minutes passed. Then more. The darkness deepened until the world became a sea of shadows. Strange sounds began to rise from the forest. Insects chirped loudly. Leaves rustled in the distance. Branches creaked as the wind pushed through them. Every sound felt louder than the last. Every movement felt closer. Amara's breathing became shallow. She pulled her knees close to her chest, hugging them tightly. Her body trembled uncontrollably. The lantern flame flickered wildly as the wind passed over it. For a moment the light almost died. And in that brief darkness, Amara thought she saw something move between the graves. She blinked quickly. Nothing. Just shadows. Just her imagination. Or so she told herself. But fear was growing inside her like a storm. Hours passed slowly, each minute feeling longer than the last. The cold air wrapped around her body. Her fingers felt numb. Her eyes burned from trying to stay open. To stay alert. Because she knew one thing clearly. If she fell asleep, she might never wake again. Then suddenly, A distant memory rose inside her mind. She remembered being a little girl, running through tall grass while her father laughed behind her. She remembered his hands lifting her high into the air. She remembered his voice telling her she was brave. That memory felt warm, safe. But when she opened her eyes again, there was no warmth, no laughter, only darkness, only silence, and crushing loneliness. Her chest tightened painfully. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she whispered again into the empty night, "Father, please stay with me." The wind suddenly picked up. Leaves swirled across the ground. The lantern flame flickered violently. And somewhere nearby, a branch snapped loudly in the darkness. Amara froze. Her body turned stiff with fear. She held her breath, listening, waiting, and deep inside her chest, a terrible feeling began to grow. Something was out there. Something was watching. And the night had only just begun. Amara did not move, not even a little. The sharp sound of the snapping branch still echoed in her ears. Her heart pounded so loudly she felt sure something in the darkness could hear it. For a long moment nothing happened. Only the sound of the wind moving through the trees. Only the soft rustling of dry leaves sliding across the ground. Amara slowly turned her head, her eyes wide, searching the darkness between the graves. But all she saw were shadows. Tall shadows. Still shadows. Watching shadows. Her breathing became shallow, quick, and uneven. She wrapped her arms tighter around her knees, pressing them against her chest as if that could protect her. Another sound. Footsteps. Soft, slow, crunching lightly against the dry earth. Amara froze. Her body refused to move. Her mind screamed at her to run, but her legs felt heavy like stone. The footsteps came again. Closer this time. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Her eyes darted toward the direction of the sound. Between two crooked gravestones, something shifted. A shape. A movement. Too quick to see clearly. Amara blinked hard, hoping her eyes were playing tricks on her. But deep inside, she knew this was not imagination. Something was there. Something real. The lantern beside her flickered wildly as the wind picked up. Its weak light danced across the graves, creating long, twisting shadows that stretched across the ground like reaching hands. Then she saw it. A shadow moved slowly across the far edge of the graveyard. Not like wind. Not like leaves. Like a person walking. Amara's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her throat felt locked. Dry. Frozen. Her gaze shifted slowly toward her father's grave. And that was when she saw something that made her blood run cold. Near the base of the grave, a shadow stood still. Tall. Dark. Silent. Her heart slammed violently against her ribs. She blinked again, her vision blurring with fear. But the shadow did not disappear. It remained there. Still. Watching. Amara squeezed her eyes shut for a second, praying it would be gone when she looked again. When she opened them, the shadow was gone. But the fear stayed. It wrapped around her chest like chains, tightening with every breath. "I am imagining things," she whispered to herself, her voice shaking badly. But her own words did not comfort her. Because the air around her had changed. It felt colder. Much colder. A sudden chill moved across her skin, raising tiny bumps along her arms. She shivered violently. Her teeth began to chatter. Even the wind felt different now. Stronger. Sharper. Like something angry moving through the night. Then came the whispers. At first they were faint. So faint she thought they were just the wind. But slowly they grew clearer. Soft voices. Carried through the darkness. Not loud. Not clear. Just whispers brushing against her ears. Amara's eyes widened. She turned her head quickly from side to side. "Who is there?" she tried to say. But her voice came out weak and trembling. The whispers continued. Oh, broken. Like voices speaking from very far away. Or from beneath the ground itself. Her chest tightened painfully. Her hands shook so badly she pressed them into the dirt to steady herself. "I am not cursed," she whispered desperately. "I did nothing wrong." But the darkness gave no answer. Only more whispers. Then suddenly, a cold wind rushed through the graveyard. Stronger than before. So strong it nearly blew out the lantern beside her. The flame danced wildly, shrinking and growing as if fighting to stay alive. And in that flashing light, Amara saw movement again. This time closer. Much closer. Something moved behind one of the nearby graves. A dark shape shifting slowly into view. Her body locked in fear. She could not scream. Could not run. Could only watch. The air around her turned ice cold. So cold it hurt to breathe. She wrapped her arms tightly around herself, shaking violently now. "Please," she whispered. "Please protect me." Her mind searched for strength, for courage, for anything that could stop the fear swallowing her whole. Then she remembered something. A prayer her father once taught her when she was little. She pressed her trembling hands together and closed her eyes tightly. Her lips moved quickly, whispering the words again and again. Her voice grew steadier with each repetition. But before she could finish, a loud sound exploded behind her. Crack! Amara screamed. Her eyes flew open. She twisted around quickly, her heart racing wildly. Behind her, a tree branch had fallen hard against the ground. Dust rose into the air. Leaves scattered everywhere. But something else moved with it. Something that was not a branch. Not leaves. Not wind. A dark shape shifted quickly in the shadows. Too fast to see clearly. Too fast to understand. Amara's breath caught painfully in her throat. Her body felt weak. Her head spun. Her vision blurred. She tried to stand, but her legs refused to move. Fear swallowed her completely. Then suddenly, another sound. Right behind her. Closer than before. So close she felt the cold air brushing against her neck. Her heart stopped. Her breath froze inside her chest. Slowly, very slowly, she turned her head. And before she could see what stood behind her, a loud whisper rushed past her ear. Cold, sure, unnatural. Amara let out a terrified cry. Her body gave up. Her strength vanished. And in that moment of pure terror, the world around her faded into darkness. She collapsed onto the cold earth beside her father's grave, unmoving, unaware, while the shadows around her slowly shifted, and the night grew deeper. For a long time Amara felt nothing. No sound, no movement, only darkness. Her body lay still against the cold ground beside her father's grave. The lantern nearby had dimmed, its small flame barely alive, casting weak light that trembled against the stones. Slowly, very slowly, Amara began to feel again. First the cold. It crept into her bones like ice. Then came the sound of the wind brushing against the trees. Soft, slow, like breath moving through the night. Her eyelids twitched. Her fingers shifted slightly against the dirt. And then with a sharp gasp, Amara woke. Her chest rose quickly as air rushed into her lungs. For a moment she did not remember where she was. But then she saw the grave. Her father's grave. And the memory came rushing back. The footsteps. The whispers. The shadow. Fear surged through her body like fire. She pushed herself up slightly, her arms shaking with weakness. The lantern's weak glow showed the empty ground around her. No one stood nearby. No shapes moved. No footsteps sounded. Yet something felt different. The air no longer felt wild or angry. Instead it felt still, heavy, quiet in a strange way. Amara hugged herself tightly, her body trembling. "I am still alive," she whispered softly, her voice breaking. Her breath came in short bursts as she forced herself to stay awake. She could not fall asleep again. Not here. Not in this place. She lifted her head slowly, her eyes searching the darkness between the graves. Nothing moved. Nothing breathed. But deep inside her chest, a strange feeling began to grow. Not fear. Something else. Something she could not explain. Then suddenly, a sound. Soft, gentle. Not like the sharp sounds from before. More like footsteps, but lighter. Careful. Measured. Amara stiffened. Her heart began racing again. She turned slowly toward the sound. At first she saw nothing. Only darkness. Only crooked stones standing silently in the night. But then, she heard it again. A soft brushing sound against the earth. Like someone walking slowly through dry grass. Her throat tightened. Her hands pressed into the soil beneath her. She wanted to run. But she stayed still. Frozen. Waiting. Listening. Then something happened that made her breath catch in her chest. A faint sound reached her ears. Not footsteps. Not whispers. Something softer. Familiar. Very familiar. It sounded like breathing. Slow. Calm. Gentle. Her eyes widened. She tilted her head slightly, trying to listen more closely. And then she heard something else. A sound that struck deep inside her heart. A soft humming. Low and quiet. But unmistakable. Amara's lips parted slowly. Her mind searched through old memories. And suddenly tears filled her eyes. Because she knew that sound. Her father used to hum that same tune when she was little. Every night before she slept. Every time she felt afraid. Her body trembled violently now, not only from fear but from confusion. This cannot be real, she whispered weakly. Her heart pounded wildly as the humming grew slightly louder. Still soft, still gentle, but closer. Amara squeezed her eyes shut tightly. Maybe she was dreaming. Maybe fear had broken her mind. But when she opened her eyes again, she noticed something strange. The lantern flame, which had been weak before, suddenly grew stronger. Its light burned brighter, pushing back the darkness around her. And the cold air that once chilled her skin began to fade. Slowly, warmth returned. Not strong warmth, but enough to make her breathing steady. Enough to calm the wild beating of her heart. She looked around carefully. Still nothing stood in front of her. No person, no shape, no visible form. But she could feel it. A presence. Close. Watching. Not with anger. Not with hatred. But with patience. With protection. Her fears slowly began to change. Not disappear. Never fully disappear, but soften. Like a storm losing its strength. Amara swallowed hard. Her voice trembled as she spoke again. Who is there? The night remained silent. But the humming continued. Soft, steady, comforting. Her chest tightened with emotion. Tears rolled slowly down her cheeks. I am afraid, she whispered. Her voice cracked as she spoke. But strangely, she did not feel alone anymore. Something unseen stood nearby. Not harming her. Not chasing her. Simply staying. Watching. Protecting. Minutes passed. Then more. Time moved slowly in the darkness. But nothing attacked. Nothing rushed toward her. Nothing dragged her into the shadows. Instead, the quiet presence remained steady through the night. Each time the wind grew louder, the lantern flame steadied itself again. Each time fear returned to her chest, the soft humming followed. Calm, gentle, familiar. Amara wrapped her arms around her knees once more, resting her head against them. Her body still trembled, but less violently now. Her breathing slowed. Her mind remained alert. But her fear slowly changed into something new. A fragile hope. She looked once more toward her father's grave. Tears filled her eyes again. Father, she whispered softly. The humming continued. Not louder. Not weaker. Just steady. As if answering her call. As if telling her she was not alone. Hours passed quietly. The night remained dark, but no longer terrifying. The shadows remained still. The wind softened. And slowly, far beyond the trees, the first pale light of dawn began touching the sky. Soft gray replaced deep black. Birds began making quiet sounds in the distance. Morning was coming. Amara lifted her head slowly. Her body felt sore and weak but alive. Very alive. She looked around one final time. The humming had faded. The warmth in the air slowly disappeared. The presence she once felt now seemed distant. Gone. But not forgotten. Amara swallowed hard, her chest tight with emotion. She wiped her tears with trembling fingers. She had survived the night. Alone. Or perhaps, not truly alone at all. As the sun slowly rose beyond the horizon, Amara whispered softly into the morning air. Thank you. And deep inside her heart, for the first time in many days, she felt the smallest spark of courage beginning to grow. But she did not yet know that the real terror had not stayed behind in the graveyard. It was already preparing to follow her home. The sun rose slowly over the village of Ndalani. Soft golden light spread across the land, chasing away the last pieces of darkness. Birds sang in the trees, and smoke began rising from cooking fires as people started their morning routines. But near the graveyard gate, a crowd had already gathered. The villagers stood quietly, whispering among themselves. Some crossed their arms tightly. Others stared nervously toward the path that led into the graveyard. They were waiting. Waiting to see what remained of Amara. Most believed they would find her lifeless. Or broken. Or driven mad by fear. Even the elders looked tense, their faces heavy with worry. Some had barely slept through the night, troubled by the choice they had made. What if the spirits took her? One villager whispered. Another shook her head slowly. Then we will know the truth, she replied, though her voice trembled. Zola stood near the front of the crowd, her daughters Nia and Tessa beside her. Nia stared toward the gate with cold expectation. Tessa hugged her arms tightly, her lips pale. Zola remained silent, her face hard, but her fingers trembled slightly at her sides. For a brief moment, fear flashed across her eyes. Not fear for Amara. Fear of something else. Something deeper. Then, a sound. Soft footsteps. Coming from inside the graveyard. The crowd fell silent. Every eye turned toward the open gate. And slowly, very slowly, A figure appeared. Amara. She stepped forward into the morning light. Alive. Her dress was dirty. Her face pale. Her hair tangled by the night wind. But she was standing. Breathing. Walking. Gasps filled the air. Several villagers stepped back in shock. She survived, someone whispered. That is not possible, another murmured. Amara walked slowly through the gate, her legs weak and heavy. Each step felt like walking through deep water. Her body ached from cold and fear. But she kept moving. She refused to fall. Her eyes scanned the crowd. So many faces. So many people who had watched her walk into darkness without stopping her. Now they stared at her as if she were something strange. Something unnatural. Nia's mouth dropped open in disbelief. Tessa grabbed Zola's arm tightly. How is she alive? Tessa whispered nervously. Zola did not answer. Her eyes remained fixed on Amara. Not with anger. Not with hatred. With fear. Deep growing fear. Amara stopped a few steps away from the crowd. She said nothing. She only stood there, breathing slowly, her eyes tired but steady. One of the elders stepped forward cautiously. You survived the night? He asked quietly. Amara nodded once. That was all. No long explanation. No dramatic words. Just a simple nod. The elder swallowed hard, glancing at the others. Whispers spread quickly through the crowd. This is not normal. The spirits should have harmed her. Why did they not touch her? Fear moved among them like smoke. Zola suddenly turned away, pulling her daughters with her. We are going home, she said sharply. Her voice sounded tight. Forced. Nia and Tessa followed quickly, both glancing back at Amara with uneasy expressions. Amara remained still for a moment. Then slowly, she followed. The walk back to the house felt strange. Different. No one insulted her. No one shouted. No one laughed. Instead, villagers moved aside when she passed, keeping distance, watching her carefully, as if she carried something unseen, something dangerous, something unknown. When Amara reached the house, she paused near the doorway. The familiar mud walls stood before her, yet something about them felt wrong. Heavier, colder. She stepped inside. The air felt still. Too still. Zola moved quickly into the kitchen, avoiding eye contact. Nia and Tessa stayed close to her, whispering quietly. Amara walked slowly to the corner where she usually slept. Her body felt exhausted. Her mind clouded with memories of the night. But before she could sit, crack. A loud sound echoed through the room. Everyone froze. A clay cup resting on the wooden shelf suddenly shattered without warning. Pieces fell onto the floor. No one had touched it. No wind had entered the room. It simply broke. Silence filled the house. Tessa let out a small cry and grabbed Nia's arm. What was that? She whispered shakily. Nia shook her head, her face pale. Zola stared at the broken pieces, her eyes wide. Fear spread across her face like a shadow. Amara stood still, her breath slow and careful. Her heart began beating faster. Not with fear. With unease. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Later that night, the strange events continued. As darkness fell, the house grew quiet. Too quiet. The air felt heavy again. Amara lay awake in her corner, staring into the darkness. Her body was tired, but sleep would not come. Then suddenly, a sound echoed from the far side of the house. Tap, 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 like something striking against wood. Amara held her breath. The tapping continued. Slow, steady. Tap, tap, tap. From another room, Tessa let out a frightened cry. Mama, did you hear that? Zola did not answer right away. But when she did, her voice sounded strained. Stay inside, she whispered. The tapping grew louder, more forceful, like something demanding attention. Then, another sound. A chair moved across the floor on its own. Scrape, scrape, scrape. Nia screamed loudly. Zola rushed toward the sound but stopped halfway. Her body froze, because the chair in the center of the room was moving, by itself. No hands touching it, no wind pushing it. Only movement, slow, unnatural. Amara sat up suddenly, her heart pounding. Her mind raced with fear. Not fear of the graveyard. Not fear of darkness. But fear of what had followed her home. Zola backed away slowly, her face drained of color. This cannot be happening, she whispered. But deep inside her heart, she already knew. This was not random. This was not chance. This was something far worse. Something watching. Something waiting. And as the house fell silent once more, a cold wind slipped through the doorway. Though no door had opened, though no window had moved. Amara hugged herself tightly, her body trembling again, because deep inside she felt the truth rising like a storm. The night in the graveyard had not ended. It had only begun. That night, no one in the house slept peacefully. Not Amara, not Nia, not Tessa, and certainly not Zola. The strange movement of the chair had shaken them all, but Zola refused to speak about it. She told the girls it was nothing, just loose wood, just tired eyes. But deep inside she did not believe her own words. Amara lay curled in her small corner, hugging her knees tightly. Her eyes stayed open, staring into the darkness. Every tiny sound made her body tense. Every shadow felt alive. Outside, the wind blew softly through the trees, brushing leaves together in low whispers. Inside the house, silence pressed heavily against the walls. Then slowly, sleep began to pull at Amara's eyes. Her body was too tired to fight it, too weak from fear. At last her eyes closed. But peace did not come. Dreams came instead. Dark dreams. Heavy dreams. She saw the graveyard again. The crooked stones. The broken ground. The flickering lantern. But this time the shadows moved faster. Closer. She tried to run, but her legs refused to move. Her feet sank into the soil as if the earth itself wanted to hold her down. Then suddenly, a loud scream shattered the silence. Amara's eyes flew open. She sat up quickly, her heart pounding. The scream had come from another room. From Tessa. "Mama! Mama!" Tessa cried loudly. Her voice was sharp with terror. Amara scrambled to her feet, her body trembling as she moved toward the sound. In the main room, Tessa clung tightly to Zola, her face pale with fear. Nia stood nearby, shaking violently. "What happened?" Zola demanded, trying to sound strong. Tessa pointed toward the far wall with a trembling finger. "I saw it," she whispered weakly. "Something was standing there, watching me." Zola turned sharply toward the wall. But there was nothing there. Only shadows. Only darkness. "You imagined it," Zola said quickly. But her voice sounded thin, uncertain. Tessa shook her head violently. "No," she whispered. "It was tall and dark, and it did not move." Nia stepped back, her breath quick and uneven. "I felt it too," she said. Something was inside this house. Amara stood quietly near the doorway watching. Her chest felt tight. Her mind returned to the graveyard, to the humming, to the presence that stayed near her all night. Something had followed her. She could feel it. And now, others could feel it too. That same night, the strange happenings grew worse. A clay pot resting near the fire suddenly tipped over without warning. Water spilled across the floor. No one had touched it. No one stood near it. Zola's eyes widened with fear. Her hands began to shake. "This house is not safe," Nia whispered. Her voice cracked with panic. The next morning the animals began acting strangely. The goats refused to enter the yard. They pulled hard against their ropes, bleating loudly in fear. Even the chickens scattered wildly whenever someone opened the door. One goat broke free from its rope entirely and ran toward the far fields, refusing to return. The villagers noticed. Of course they noticed. Nothing stayed hidden in Delani. By midday whispers began again. But this time the whispers were not about Amara. They were about Zola. "I saw the goats running from her yard," one man said. "That house carries something dark now," another replied. Fear began spreading through the village once again. But now, the fear had shifted. That night, the terror returned stronger than before. Zola lay awake on her sleeping mat, staring at the ceiling. Her daughters slept beside her, their bodies tense even in sleep. Outside, the wind had grown stronger. It pushed against the walls like invisible hands. Then suddenly, a loud crash shattered the silence. Zola sat up instantly. Her heart raced wildly. Another crash followed. Then another. Glass breaking. Clay shattering. She rushed into the main room, her daughters stumbling behind her. What they saw made them freeze in place. 3 clay plates lay shattered across the floor. Pieces scattered everywhere. The shelf above them stood empty. But no one had touched it. No one had moved near it. Tessa burst into tears. "This is punishment," she cried. Nia covered her ears, shaking her head. "Make it stop," she whispered. Zola stood frozen. Her breath came in sharp, uneven bursts. Inside her chest, something heavy began rising. Something she had buried long ago. Guilt. Later that same night, Zola finally fell asleep. But her sleep brought no peace. Only nightmares. She found herself standing in the graveyard. Alone. Just like Amara had been. The wind howled loudly around her. The lantern flickered weakly. And across the ground, shadows moved. Slow. Silent. Watching her. Then she saw him. A tall figure standing near one of the graves. Still. Unmoving. She tried to run. But her legs refused to move. Her feet felt trapped in the earth. Then the figure stepped forward. Slowly. Closer. Closer. Zola tried to scream, but no sound came out. Her mouth moved. Her chest tightened. But her voice stayed trapped inside her throat. Then suddenly, the figure lifted its head. And though she could not see its face clearly, she felt something deep inside her chest. Recognition. Fear. Memory. Zola screamed loudly. Her eyes flew open. She sat up suddenly, gasping for air. Her body shook violently. Sweat covered her face. Mama? Nia cried, rushing toward her. What did you see? Zola could not answer at first. Her breath came in short bursts. Her heart pounded painfully inside her chest. I saw someone, she whispered finally. Her voice trembled badly. Tessa stared at her with wide eyes. Who? She asked. Zola swallowed hard. Her lips trembled, but the words refused to come out. Because deep inside, she already knew. She knew why the house felt heavy. She knew why the animals ran. She knew why the shadows moved. And she knew. This terror was not random. This was not chance. This was something coming back. Something she had tried to forget. Something she had buried long ago. The next day, the villagers avoided their house completely. Children were warned not to walk near it. Women took longer paths to avoid passing by the yard. Even the elders began whispering among themselves. This is no longer about the girl, one elder said quietly. This house carries guilt. Inside the home, tension grew heavier with each passing hour. Nia cried often now. Tessa refused to sleep alone. And Zola no longer shouted at Amara. No longer insulted her. Instead she watched her. Carefully. Fearfully. As if Amara carried something unseen beside her. One evening, as the sun dipped below the trees, a sudden loud knock echoed against the door. Bang. 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 All three women froze. No one moved. The knocking continued. Slow. Heavy. Demanding. But when Zola finally gathered the courage to open the door, no one stood outside. Only empty air. Only silence. But at the bottom of the doorway, fresh dirt lay scattered across the floor. Dark. Cold. Like soil taken straight from a grave. Tessa screamed loudly. Nia covered her mouth in horror. And Zola stared at the dirt with trembling hands. Because deep inside her heart, the truth was growing louder. The fear was no longer just fear. It was guilt. And guilt never stays buried forever. The village of Ndalani had seen many strange things in its time. But what was happening now felt different. Heavier. Like a shadow that refused to leave. By morning, rumors had spread everywhere. People no longer spoke in loud voices. Instead, they whispered in corners, behind doors, and under trees. That house is cursed. No, it is punishment. The graveyard followed them home. Even the elders no longer felt certain. So they made a decision. They called for someone who had been silent for many years. A man named Elder Cato. He was older than most of the village remembered, with deep lines on his face and tired eyes that had seen too much. He arrived at Zola's house just after midday. The moment he stepped inside, he stopped walking. His eyes scanned the room slowly. The broken objects, the scattered dirt near the door, the restless silence. Everything told him something was wrong. Very wrong. Amara stood quietly in the corner. She did not speak. She rarely did. But her eyes followed the elder carefully. Zola stepped forward quickly. Elder Cato, she said nervously, you must help us. Something is attacking this house. The elder did not respond immediately. Instead, he looked at Amara. Long. Carefully. Like he was searching for something hidden beneath her skin. Then he spoke. Before I help you, he said slowly, I need to understand what has been done here. Zola hesitated. Nia and Tessa stood behind her, silent and uneasy. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the elder turned and walked outside. Bring me to the graveyard, he said firmly. The words made Zola stiffen. Amara followed quietly behind them. The walk to the graveyard felt different this time. The sun was high, but the air felt cold. The villagers watched from a distance as the group passed through the paths. Whispers followed them again. But this time, Amara noticed something strange. No one looked at her with anger anymore. They looked at her with confusion. And fear, but not only fear of her. Fear of something connected to her. When they reached the graveyard, Elder Cato stopped near the entrance. He closed his eyes for a moment, then slowly opened them. "I have not been here in many years," he said quietly. His voice carried weight. "History. Bang." He walked inside first. The others followed. As they moved deeper among the graves, Elder Cato's expression grew heavier. He stopped suddenly near one old, cracked stone. Amara felt something shift inside her chest. The grave belonged to her father. The elder stared at it for a long time. Then he spoke. "This man. I remember him." Zola's body stiffened immediately. Nia and Tessa exchanged uneasy looks. Elder Cato turned slowly toward Zola. "And I remember you," he added. Silence fell across the graveyard. Even the wind seemed to stop. Zola's lips parted slightly, but no words came out. The elder's voice grew lower. "Years ago, your husband was not the only one who died in that house." Amara's heart began to beat faster. She looked up sharply. Zola's face turned pale. "What are you talking about?" Zola whispered. Elder Cato stepped closer. "Your husband discovered something," he said slowly. "Something he should not have known." Zola took a step back. "No," she said quickly. "That is not true." But the elder continued. "He found out that you were stealing from the village, selling land that did not belong to you, hiding money, lies upon lies." The air grew heavier. Nia and Tessa looked at each other in shock. Zola shook her head rapidly. "That is not." And when he threatened to tell the village, the elder interrupted. "He died suddenly." Silence. Sure. Heavy. Unbreakable. Amara felt her chest tighten. She looked at Zola. Her stepmother's face was shaking now, but not only with fear, with something deeper, something broken. Elder Cato's eyes did not leave her. "And there is more," he said quietly. Zola's breath became uneven. "No more," she whispered. But he continued anyway. "Your husband did not die naturally." The words hit like thunder. Nia stepped back in shock. Tessa covered her mouth. Amara stood completely still. The elder lowered his voice. "He was poisoned." The graveyard felt colder instantly. Zola's body trembled violently now. Her eyes filled with panic. "I did what I had to do," she suddenly said, her voice breaking. "He would have destroyed everything." The confession hung in the air like poison. Nia gasped. Tessa began crying. Amara felt something shift inside her chest. Not anger, not hatred, but understanding, mixed with deep sadness. Elder Cato looked at Zola with disappointment. "You buried the truth for years," he said. "But the earth does not forget." He turned slowly toward Amara. "And now, it has followed her." Zola froze. "What do you mean?" she asked weakly. The elder pointed toward Amara. "The presence that followed her from this graveyard is not harm." He paused. "It is truth." A heavy silence fell. Even the wind seemed to listen. Elder Cato continued. "This graveyard protects the innocent and exposes the guilty." Zola's legs began to shake. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." The elder's voice remained calm. "When Amara was forced to sleep here, the truth awakened." He looked at Zola directly. "And it came home with her." A cold realization spread across Zola's face. For the first time, she understood. The broken plates, the moving chair, the whispers, the fear. It was not random. It was not chaos. It was consequence. Nia stepped back, shaking her head. "We didn't know," she whispered. Tessa cried louder. "We didn't know," she repeated. But Elder Cato looked at them sadly. "Guilt does not wait for knowledge," he said. Zola dropped to her knees slowly. Her hands covered her face. Her body shook violently. "I did it to survive," she whispered. But her voice was weak. Empty. Amara stood silently watching her. Tears filled her eyes, but she did not move. For a long time no one spoke. Then Elder Cato turned toward the village behind them. "The truth has returned," he said firmly, "and the village must decide what it becomes." Behind them, distant villagers began gathering at the edge of the graveyard. They had heard enough. They had seen enough. Whispers spread quickly through the crowd. Fear shifted again. But this time, it was not directed at Amara. It was directed at Zola. And deep inside the graveyard, the wind moved once more. Not violently, not angrily, but steadily, like something that had finally been heard. By the time the group returned from the graveyard, the village of Ndalani was no longer the same. Word had spread faster than fire in dry grass. Zola's name was no longer spoken with fear alone. Now it was spoken with certainty, with judgment. with anger. People stood outside their homes as Zola, Nia, Tessa, and Amara walked back through the village path. But this time no one looked at Amara as a curse. They looked at her as someone who had carried truth back from the dead. And Zola. Zola walked with her head lowered. Her steps were slow, heavy. Like each movement was pulling her deeper into something she could not escape. The house that once felt like a place of control now felt like a trap closing in around her. That night the village gathered. Not at the market. Not under the baobab tree. But outside Zola's home. Silence covered the crowd like a thick cloth. Even the wind seemed afraid to speak. Elder Cato stood at the front. His voice was calm but firm. "The truth has been revealed," he said. "Now it must be answered." Zola stood at the doorway of her house. Nia and Tessa stood behind her, both trembling. Amara stood slightly apart, watching quietly. Her face was tired, but no longer afraid. The elder continued. "For years you built your life on silence and lies." His eyes locked on Zola. "And now the silence has broken." Zola's lips trembled. She looked around the crowd. No one stepped forward to help her. No one defended her. For the first time she was alone. Truly alone. Nia suddenly stepped forward, her voice shaking. "We didn't know everything," she cried. "We only followed her." Tessa quickly nodded. "We thought she was protecting us." Murmurs moved through the crowd. But no sympathy came. Because the truth had already been heard. Elder Cato raised his hand. "Fear does not erase responsibility," he said. Zola's breathing became uneven. Her hands shook violently at her sides. She looked at Amara. For a long moment she said nothing. Then her voice broke. "I did it to survive," she whispered again. "Your father would have taken everything from me." Amara's eyes filled with emotion. But she did not interrupt. Zola's voice grew weaker. "I was afraid. I was always afraid." Her knees began to tremble. And slowly, she collapsed to the ground. Dust rose around her. The crowd remained silent. Nia and Tessa rushed forward but stopped short, unable to help her. Zola covered her face with her hands. Her shoulders shook as years of hidden guilt finally broke through. "I am sorry," she whispered. The words barely reached the crowd. But they were enough. Elder Cato spoke again. "Confession does not remove consequence," he said. A heavy silence followed. Then something strange happened. A sudden wind moved through the village. Not strong. Not violent. But steady. It passed through the crowd, through the trees, through the open doorway of the house. And as it passed, the lanterns flickered. Amara felt it. The same presence from the graveyard. Not frightening. Not harmful. But present. Watching. Waiting. Zola felt it too. Her body stiffened. Her breath stopped for a moment. And then she whispered again. "I feel it." Her voice cracked. "It is here." Nia stepped back in fear. Tessa grabbed her arm. "What is here?" she whispered. But Zola did not answer. Her eyes stared into empty space, as if she could see something no one else could. Suddenly, a clay pot inside the house shattered loudly. Crack. Everyone turned toward the sound. Then another object fell. Then another. The house trembled with invisible movement. People in the crowd stepped back. Whispers spread again. "It is not finished. The spirit is still here." Elder Cato raised his voice over the growing fear. "This is not vengeance," he said firmly. "This is truth refusing to be buried." Amara slowly stepped forward. For the first time since everything began, she spoke. Her voice was soft, but steady. "I did not bring this," she said. "I only survived it." The crowd turned to her. Silence returned. Even the wind seemed to slow. Amara looked at Zola. Not with hatred. Not with anger. But with something deeper. Sadness. Loss. "And now I understand," she said quietly. "What was buried never stays buried." Zola lowered her head again. Her body shook softly. Nia and Tessa stood frozen behind her, no longer speaking. There was nothing left to say. Elder Cato looked at the crowd one final time. "The village must decide," he said. "Do we continue in fear, or do we accept truth?" No one answered immediately. But slowly villagers began stepping back. Not away from Amara, but away from Zola, creating space, distance, judgment. Zola remained on the ground, broken, silent. And as night began to fall over Ndalani, the wind passed once more through the village, soft, slow, like something finally leaving, or something finally finished. The night after the confession, Ndalani felt different. Not loud, not peaceful, but lighter. as if a heavy weight that had pressed on the village for years had finally started to lift. Zola was taken into the small hut near the edge of the village, where she would stay under watch. She no longer fought. She no longer shouted. The strength she once used to control others had completely broken. Nia and Tessa stayed with her, but they were silent now. The fear in their eyes had turned into something else, confusion mixed with regret. They no longer looked like cruel girls. They looked like children who had followed darkness without understanding it. Amara returned to the small corner of the house she once called home, but it no longer felt like a place of suffering. It felt empty and strangely quiet. That night she could not sleep, not because she was afraid, but because her heart was too full. Outside, the wind moved softly through the trees. The same wind that once carried whispers of fear now felt calm, almost gentle. Amara stepped outside quietly. The village was asleep. Only the stars stayed awake above her. She walked slowly toward the open field, stopping at a small distance from the graveyard. She did not enter this time. She only stood and looked at it from afar. The place that once brought her terror now felt still. No shadows moved. No whispers followed. Only silence remained. A silence that did not feel dangerous anymore. Amara closed her eyes. Her father's face came into her memory again, not as pain this time but as comfort. "I survived," she whispered softly into the night. Her voice trembled slightly but not from fear. From release. Behind her, footsteps approached slowly. She turned. Elder Cato stood a few steps away, watching her quietly. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he said gently, "You were never the curse they believed you to be." Amara looked down. "I was only a girl," she said softly. The elder nodded. "Yes," he replied. "And the strongest truth is often carried by those who suffer the most." A quiet silence followed. Then Amara spoke again. "What happens to them now?" Elder Cato looked toward the distant hut where Zola rested. "That is no longer your burden," he said. "Justice has already spoken. What remains is healing." Amara nodded slowly, though her heart still carried weight. Forgiveness did not come easily. But hatred no longer had a place inside her. Days passed. The village slowly returned to life. Not as it was before, but differently. People became more careful with their words. More aware of pain they could not see. Zola remained distant from the village, living quietly under supervision. Some days she cried. Some days she said nothing at all. Regret had replaced her pride. Nia and Tessa began helping in small ways, fetching water, repairing paths, doing what they could to make amends in silence. Amara, however, was given something she never had before. Not because the past disappeared, but because it no longer controlled her. One morning she returned once more to her father's grave. She knelt gently beside it. The earth was still. The wind was soft. "I understand now," she whispered. "You didn't leave me alone. I just couldn't see what was still protecting me." Tears fell quietly, but they were no longer tears of pain. They were tears of release. She stood slowly and looked at the village one last time. The same village that once rejected her, now watched her with respect. Not fear. Not suspicion. But understanding. Amara turned away from the graveyard and walked forward. Not running from her past. Not trapped in it. But finally, free from it. And as the sun rose over Ndalani, its light no longer felt like judgment. Felt like a new beginning.